Hi, everybody. I want to welcome you to Reason Rises, the first new episode after the relaunch. And I especially want to give a warm welcome and an extreme thank you to my guest, Ewen Allison. And Ewen, would you take a moment and introduce yourself and mention what kind of law that you're involved in, etc.?
Well, my name is Ewen Allison. As we just heard from Doug, I am an attorney. I'm a member of the District of Columbia Bar. I've done a lot of work in war crimes law, and that remains my primary field of interest. Though I haven't done much serious with it for the past 20 years, it's still my first love.
So, and what we wanted to talk about tonight was specifically just what we see going on in America, vis-a-vis what we have seen throughout world history happening in other places. But for right now, you and you're a good friend of mine. We are obviously Facebook friends. We see what each other posts. um, I feel like a lot of the communication that happens these days and a lot of people's understanding of world affairs and American politics is essentially meme based these days. And my personal opinion is that that is, and to fix the lighting here, sorry everybody. Um, I I I feel that we're headed in the wrong direction, and I don't really know anybody in my personal life and my day-to-day interactions. I don't know anybody who thinks that everything's going fine and we're headed in the correct direction. So let me ask you as a first tee up here, what is the most important thing that you think people should be paying attention to right now in America?
Each other, each other.
Good
Um,
answer.
yeah,
Go ahead.
the biggest thing we've lost, I think, is the ability to have civil discourse. James Madison and a few other of the founders realized that people would be talking about the great issues of the day between each other. And some of it would be good, some of it would be bad. We've got the Republican structures to filter out the bad stuff. But we've at least got to be talking stuff together. And if all we're doing is just throwing memes at each other, we're just throwing very limited ideas about our own feelings, not necessarily the facts that lie behind them, where we want to go with a particular meme or even group of memes. I think if we could just get used to talking more than 3 or 4 sentences at each other at a time, and even that is at the extreme limit at some social media posts. But at least trade, go into a little bit of depth about why it is that you think. Um, what it is that you think, and be open to what other people think also. At least get that much fact about what our differences of opinion are, and then eventually we can narrow things down to differences of fact and look for reasons why we think one thing is a fact or not.
Yeah, I mean, fantastic general answer. What about in the news? I mean, what there's so much coming at us these days, and Steve Bannon several months ago made clear what the strategy is. Forgive the light failure. Um, Steve Bannon's been really clear about what the strategy is, which is essentially to flood the zone. Get so much happening every day and so many things to pay attention to that it's just impossible for any one person to keep track of everything they should be keeping track of in order to vote correctly. And when I say correctly, I mean not against their own interests, in a way that is actually going to further America and their own life towards a better place. So they're flooding the zone every single day. And I want to make clear right here, you are a registered Republican, correct?
I'm a registered Republican, yes.
But you are, we don't want to say anti-Trump because we don't want
Oh, by
anybody.
all means.
Well, okay, sure.
The
But what
man
we
does
don't
not
want,
have my support, no.
So before I even finish my question, let's dive into that for 1 second. This thing about Trump derangement syndrome, that they want to accuse anybody who thinks that Donald Trump is not doing everything correctly, anybody who has any criticism whatsoever, has TDS, Trump derangement syndrome. Tell me how you feel about being tackled with that label as a registered Republican who is anti Trump, as you put it.
We do have to face the fact that a lot of people are very disappointed, even very anxious, with Trump's elections, both times that he was elected. Uh, and, you know, uh, it's an emotional upset. It's not necessarily derangement, which is an exaggeration. Uh, but you can have an understanding of where figures like this have appeared in history and see where they're going and see them as they build their power, as they begin abusing power, and see where that's going. And it's not inaccurate to draw parallels. But this is fact-based. This is fact-based. This is not just being upset that the person opposite Trump lost. Okay, it's not just panic that Trump is in office. There is a factual basis. There are patterns that we see emerging that we understand have to be faced and dealt with, hopefully muted, eventually dampened, and if need be, these trends have to be beaten back. You don't go from there, though, to losing complete touch with reality, which
Yeah.
is the exaggeration that gets thrown at a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, one thing I don't appreciate when it comes to TDS is, and speaking of which, I do find it tedious. People, people who have been, stuck with this label of Trump derangement syndrome, they don't have bumper stickers on their car that say "fuck Trump." They don't have, banners outside of their house or flags or signs in their yard that say Trump is a piece of shit. And they don't come up
Ouch.
with, interesting ways like, let's go Brandon, to get across the idea that they are Trump haters.
Uh-huh.
They're not out there screaming from the rooftops. They're just coming with what I would call reasonable criticism. And that's literally the point of this country. That is the reason we wanted to get away from a king, is we wanted to be able to criticize our leadership and, if necessary, change that leadership. And we obviously chose not to do that as a country this last go around. We'll see how it plays out the next time. But when the other side, if you will, is doing things like "Let's Go Brandon," and they literally, for 4 years had, not just bumper stickers but flags and everything, and they talk openly when they go to the bar or the restaurant, ignoring the fact that the person next to them might not feel the same way. They were very open about "Let's Go Brandon" and basically saying "fuck Biden," which is, when I was growing up, it was inappropriate to talk politics or religion in a public space. It was just
Yes.
something that you didn't do.
Right.
And it wasn't a way to make friends, and it certainly wasn't something you wanted your kids seeing you doing, because we all got along and things were discussed and compromises were made, and you dealt with the fact that every 4 years your side is going to be, out of power, and they'll come back into power 4 years later. It seems to me now that the other side of, well, and by the other side I mean MAGA. It seems that MAGA has decided that it is, uh it's antithetical to them to have any kind of compromise whatsoever, to get along, to discuss things rationally. I would, I bump into people in the bar who I would talk to maybe 6, 8 months ago, who felt perfectly fine and open about basically just telling me that I'm a piece of crap if I don't agree with everything that they say, and that everybody is, and that is filtering straight down from the top. You know, these true social posts that Trump does on a daily basis are clearly trying to foment something terrible against anyone who disagrees. And in my limited knowledge of history, that seems like authoritarianism. It seems like dictatorship. And if someone wants to argue that it's not those things, I want to hear a rational argument, and I haven't heard it. Are you hearing rational arguments from anybody as to why things are going the way they should go and that this is how we should continue communicating with each other? I mean, are we getting anywhere?
There's rationality to a point. Uh, Unfortunately, I don't have many interlocutors who are policy wonks who are firmly grounded in the right-leaning part of the policy field. You know, whether we should um, limit government regulation, whether we should tax so much,
Mm.
whether there should be. I'm going to say a dirty word, but we've had it since the founding. I'm going to say the word wealth redistribution.
Mm-hmm.
Um, even the side note, Adam Smith himself said, "You got a wealthy landowner, a not so wealthy landowner. You can tax the wealthy landowner a little more and give that margin to the needs of the poor." So it's not an old idea. It's not communism, but for some reason, anything about seeing to the needs of people that the system fails, the capitalist system fails, that doesn't turn directly into communism, but there is the image that it does. And maybe there are some who are very um, hyper rationalistic, have a full understanding of all the patterns of cause and effect, and come out, yeah, let's lean right on all these various issues. I don't have any interlocutors like that. What I
Mm-hmm.
do have are a lot of people who paint the left wing and Democrats with a very broad brush, and not everyone takes it to the extreme that calls us all communists. There's a little leaning towards socialism, so that makes us socialism. And if you're not careful, it segues seamlessly into communism. If you don't stop it, not everyone goes all the way there. But there is this sense among the people, the right wingers whom I speak to, that the left wing has gone too far. And yeah, the angrier people that I talk to think that Democrats have to be destroyed, think that the left wing has to be destroyed because they're destroying the country. And really, take a step back, and we're not really that much worse off than we were in previous decades. And we've had this, forgive the use of the term, we've had this liberal consensus since Eisenhower days, which is that you've got um, generally capitalism is the main engine of the economy. You, you hold it back a little bit so it doesn't get too extreme. You have high marginal tax rates so that the uh, very, very wealthy are taxed much more than those who are barely getting by. Things of this sort, and this consensus held for decades after World War II until Reagan came in, and even then uh, it still remained generally what people understand government should be doing. Um, we had the massive welfare reform under Bill Clinton, and then things still ticked along. And now we have Doge.
Right.
uh, and I mean, it's this misunderstanding that if government is spending money, you don't instantly fix everything by cutting everything, giving every department a 20% haircut. Just then you end up hiring people that you absolutely needed because you weren't paying attention to people who are necessary, and as a consequence, people are having to be hired back.
Well,
Um,
we could, I mean, we could dive into Doge and as you call it, a haircut of 20%, you know,
I
we
don't
could
know if
talk
that
about
figure
that.
is correct, but that's the principle, is that Doge was essentially taking an axe to where they thought,
Yeah.
wasn't worth spending money on.
Yeah, actually a chainsaw, if you remember, but,
I stand corrected.
so yeah, sorry. But you, so here's a distinction I want to make, and I think it's really crucial that people understand the distinction is what Democrats actually believe and actually act on as a general group when we're talking a plurality on any given issue, which can have different facets. So that's why I say plurality as opposed to majority. Anything that any side believes the other side believes is coming from the media, and it's coming from the memes, and it's coming from social media, and it's not factually correct. It's not, you know, pardon me. One thing I want to make really clear in this podcast series is who I am, because I'm a good example of the other Democrats that I run into. I live in rural America, so I'm outside of a big city. I go to big cities and I see the liberal tinge, and I do see the you know, everything from the trans rights stuff to, you know, I mean, you can even take it as far as veganism, what have you. I mean, there's Republicans who are vegan, but you hear about a vegan, you assume that they're a liberal and that they wear
Sure, yeah,
Birkenstocks and whatever.
yeah,
You know, these are all generalities that do not match 90% of the people that I run into who take the label Democrat. I personally would never come and take your guns away, and you damn well better not come and take my guns away. I have
fair enough.
guns, many of them. I love them. I've loved them since I was a kid. My father, who is an extreme Democrat, loves his guns and taught me to use them safely. Um, Trans issues, maybe for another episode, but the idea that it's something that the Democrats put any thought into whatsoever on a daily basis if they don't have a trans family member is ludicrous. It's not something that we think about, talk about, you know. I care about it in the sense that I think that every group should have the same freedom as every other group, but it's just not something that I put any thought into, you know, on a day-to-day basis. And there are so many other issues that we could dig into that the media or social media will make you think this is what Democrats are about. And the fact of the matter is that's what, you know, a tiny percentage of Democrats are about, but they're being very loud right now and they're getting a lot of exposure. And it's not an accurate picture. The same way that just 5, 6 days ago, I ran into a gentleman who will be one of my guests on this podcast series. I met at a local bar, local watering hole, and we were talking about the same thing on the Republican end. That, you know, do you really think that everything that Trump is doing is, you know, just gold, that it's all gospel, everything that he says you believe? He goes, no. You know, he was here
Rushing.
near where I live, but he's actually from Oklahoma. He owns a farm, a large farm, and he's lost all of his workers because of the immigration enforcement,
Huh.
uh, not from raids, but just because his workers didn't show up this year. The
They were
majority of them.
probably afraid of being arrested, whether they're here lawfully or not.
Exactly. And not only that, but he farms, he said that he has 4 or 5 different crops, but one of them is soy. And apparently the soybeans mostly were being sent to China previously. And because of the tariffs, or I don't remember what, but because of some Trump policy, he's basically sitting on a ton of product that he can't get rid of. And because of that, he's not going to be growing as much in the next crop.
Did your friend
And
expect that to happen when he, voted for Trump? Or did he vote for Trump?
no,
Did
no,
he
and
understood that
that's go
did he
ahead.
understand that there would be tariffs, these massive tariffs? I think I'd have to check, but I'm pretty sure that was part of Agenda 47.
So there's two things about that. In my experience and in my discussions, number one, they they thought he was half joking. They expected tariffs, but they didn't think they would affect them, and they
Mm.
didn't think they would be as severe as they are. And number two, you know, they they is such a broad term. The ones with whom I've spoken believed that he would do what he said up to an extent, but they did not think that it was going to be such extreme measures that we're seeing right now.
Yeah.
And it's starting to hurt them personally, particularly when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to the farming, not just tariffs, but some type of limit that he mentioned that I would have to look up on how much you can export or something related to that. And especially these immigration raids, what I'm hearing right now, people are not happy that the worst of the worst are not who's being targeted. When Stephen Miller says we've got to do 3,000 or however many arrests a
Uh-huh.
day, and in order to do that, you have to take away my babysitter and the cooks at my local restaurant that I love going to. And you've got to take away the day laborers at the farms. And you've got to take away the folks who, come and do gardening for me. I mean,
See,
that is
that's
not what
it.
anybody planned on.
Tracking down criminals takes time, it takes money, it takes resources. And, if you've a set finite of people who can do anything, and you've got to make this quota, they're not going after the worst of the worst. They're going after the low-hanging fruit, if you'll forgive the
Hmm.
expression.
Hmm. Yeah, well, that's obvious. And they cover that in the media. But one thing that I think needs to be said, and I don't hear it said on any kind of media, and I don't know why, but we all need to be reminded that a first immigration offense, which might include someone who got here 30 years ago. So if somebody got here 30 years ago and crossed the border illegally, which means they never checked in, essentially, got across the border, started a life, started a family, been here for 30 years, as of today, that's still their first offense. A first immigration offense, such as failing to check in at a border checkpoint, is a civil offense. It's on par with running a stop sign. It's on par with now um, the ramifications are more severe. But as far as the law is concerned, it's essentially an equal crime. It's on par with running a stop sign or not paying your rent to your landlord because you were having a rough month. It's
Mhm.
a civil offense.
Right.
The ramifications do not include jail time. They
Correct.
might include a small fine, they might include being deported,
Uh-huh.
but it doesn't become an actual crime. They are not criminals until they re enter the country illegally a second time,
Right.
or if they commit a crime while they're here after that initial illegal crossing. And
Yeah,
that
I tell you, I
essentially
have
is
not actually wallowed in immigration law for years. I don't
right.
know whether your representation of the law is correct.
I checked it
Um,
last night before we had this discussion, so I made sure I was correct.
okay, well, to the extent that you're reading up on it is correct, okay then.
Well, it needs to be said, and people are obviously free to. I encourage everybody to fact check anything I
Oh,
ever
yeah.
say, and
Yeah, the
I
wonderful
want.
thing about having all of our there's actually a line in our Constitution that everything the Congress does has to have a record made of it. And we're blessed that we can actually look up and see what our laws are. Not every people in every country have that resource available to them. And people can check. People don't. I can be talking with people, and right in our own Constitution, there are umpteen copies of it lying around, but very few people actually realize that some of the things that it actually says. And one of my big frustrations as a lawyer is teaching people stuff that they should remember from high school civics.
Hmm.
Um, Sorry about the digression.
No, you're good, and I worry about what my kids. I've got two kids. One's 14; she just entered high school, and I got a 10-year-old, and I worry about whether or not they're learning civics at all, and if they are, what is the political bent that that teacher has that they're going to be teaching my kid. So I'm always making sure to teach, as much as I can from at home.
Uh-huh.
But I people are welcome to go look it up and say what you'd like in the comments about it. It is true that a first immigration offense, crossing the border illegally, getting here, they are not criminals. They have not
Right.
committed a crime. They have committed a civil offense. Again, if they commit a crime while they are here, illegally, quote unquote, that essentially turns it into the equivalent of an aggravated crime. And they could face jail time. They could face severe penalties. And also, they could not only face deportation, but a ban from the country.
Possibly, yeah.
That's serious, and those people should be dealt with. And there are legal ways to get here. Congress is not doing its job in making it easier so that we can help our economy by making sure we've got enough workers and making sure we continue to be the successful melting pot that we've always been. But coming across the border one time undocumented is not a crime. It's a civil offense, is what it is. So again, on par with not stopping at a stop sign. Um, so
It's
I just think it's
not
really
filing a
important for
tax
people
return
to,
better, but yeah.
but I just think it's really important for people to know that because here's the thing: is what we're seeing on our TV screens right now and I'm not pro illegal immigration. I want to make that really clear. I think people should come in the legal way, and I think they should come in. We need them. It's what makes America great, is our diversity. It's what makes our food great. It's what makes our music great. It's what makes our sports great, our baseball
Right.
and our everything. We need people from other countries, or else we're not America. There's a
Right.
different. There's a reason that Scandinavia is not the engine um, of innovation and popular culture that America is, and that reason is a lack of diversity, in
Right.
my opinion. So these people are important. They've always been important, and not to ignore the fact that virtually all of us came from some immigrant who came here legally or illegally if we're not Native American. President Trump himself, his mother was an illegal
Scottish.
immigrant.
Yeah.
She came here undocumented, and now he hates undocumented immigrants. So I find that odd. But yeah, I think it's important to realize that that's really what made America great in the first place. It's what continues to. And we are already seeing the numbers that when we start getting rid of these people en masse, our economy suffers and our innovation suffers.
Yeah. Think of it.
And,
Think of
you
it.
know,
There's what, 10, 12 million unlawful, undocumented immigrants in this country. They're all consumers. What happens to
hmm
a big economy when you lose 12 million consumers? A big
hmm
chunk of them, like your friend knows firsthand, a big chunk of them are actually working,
hmm
and so you're losing that labor. You're losing a source. You're losing a source of taxable income. That they do pay taxes. They'll never collect Social Security, but they do pay those taxes,
hmm
and so
So
that
wait, let's clarify that point. Keep your thought, but let's make a point of that they pay into the system, but they can't collect from the system, and it's a big
of
deal. I
course,
believe
yeah,
that I have to look it up, and I will on the side while you're finishing your thought. But I believe I heard a pretty extreme number in the billions of money that they contribute but cannot collect on.
I believe it.
But go
I
ahead.
believe it.
Go ahead with your thought.
I had finished it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So
well, I'm
it
actually going to
is.
look that
Yeah,
up right now. We're going to pretend that, like Rogan, we've got a Jamie, and I can say, Jamie, will you look that up? But instead, Jamie is my Motorola Razr here. So,
fair enough.
how much do illegal immigrants contribute to the economy, or excuse me, to the how should I word it? Not
Uh,
taxation system.
why not?
Well, how about just Social Security?
Okay.
Hmm. All right, $25.7 billion as of 2022, which is the most recent numbers.
Right.
So we know that we're looking in the, 25 somewhere around there $1 billion
Uh-huh.
that goes into the Social Security system, a system which, by the way, a lot of people are afraid is going to collapse because there's not enough money going into it. and they don't get to collect that Social Security when they get of age. So, you know, my question to you as a registered Republican who is anti-Trump, as you were willing to put it, why are you anti-Trump now that we've thrown a few issues in that we're clearly concerned about? Why are you anti-Trump? Enumerate your issues.
Uh, well, the biggest thing, and this started even before he got his first election, is I don't think the man thinks well. I decided against voting against Trump when I heard how he actually makes decisions. And he's heavily influenced by whoever talks with him last, and that's whom he
Mhm,
goes with. And this is how he ran his business. And I've got a master's degree in international affairs also. And one of the things that we had to learn happens is how the best policymakers, the best actors come to their decisions. And it is not going with whoever talked to them last. They have to cast a wide net in terms of their own thinking and consider information as it comes from all these various viewpoints and do a calculus about um, weak actors and strong actors, patterns of cause and effect that come up, and then the actual facts on the ground in terms of what actually happened and where the trends are going. You have to know all these things, and it did not seem to me like Trump knew it, which
mhm,
made him vulnerable to being manipulated.
mhm,
And then we go on, fast forward into the policy issues. I never read all of Agenda 47, which is where Trump, in his campaign videos, has these various issues where he talks in a particular area with he gives a short blurb. Then there's a write up of what he'll be putting in an executive order or establishing as a priority. I never read all of those, but the one that I did read, it was blood chilling. It was titled something about reversing birthright citizenship.
mhm,
Now, both of us, maybe you've taught your kids this about how our Constitution is amended. If there's an amendment that says, well, we do have an amendment that says who is a citizen of the United States. And we know that to change that amendment, you've got to have three quarters of Congress, I think it is. Um, I mean, two-thirds of each house of
three
Congress and three
three
quarters of the
quarters of
Supreme Court.
states.
Yeah, all have to ratify this amendment, or either the state legislatures or special conventions. And then you've got a change to an amendment. It happened, I think, for sure once before, and that's why alcohol is allowed to be sold again.
Mhm,
Um, but and then here there was this plank in Agenda 47 where uh, in the opening lines it says that Trump's going to reverse birthright citizenship. No president can do that by fiat, and here he
right.
was claiming he could do it. Now you read a little further, and you find out where he's heading, and then you wonder, well, why didn't he say so up front? He
Mhm,
just this thing about you can dangle the bright object and then say what you really mean. Why not just say what you really mean in the first place? But obviously, he was playing to the crowd that wanted to end birthright citizenship. Well, forget that. You go down further, and what he's doing in the explanation, and this was echoed in the actual proclamation, um, he's going to change the interpretation that our Supreme Court made about the 14th Amendment. How
mhm.
deep can I go in the weeds on this?
As much as you want, but we still are trying to basically enumerate, what all of your issues with him are, and I'm sure you can't enumerate all those, but
Well,
uh,
okay. Essentially, he wanted to reverse a Supreme Court finding about what the 14th Amendment meant. Now,
mhm,
reversing a finding is something only the Supreme Court can do. Good man. Uh, and here was saying that he would do it. And that was part of it. And the other part was that would order government employees not to give benefits that citizens have. Um, to people who had less than one grandparent who was a natural born citizen.
Oh.
So you essentially had to have
Which
a
would include
parent.
him,
Yeah,
or not
so
wouldn't include
you
him. Yeah,
essentially
right.
had to have a parent who was a natural born citizen yourself before you could get a passport, before you could receive Social Security. So, but now, understand that government employees have to enforce our Constitution. He was ordering them not to. He has an explicit duty in our Constitution to take care that the law be faithfully executed, which he does not do by ordering government employees to ignore part of our Constitution. My blood ran cold. I was infuriated. I didn't need to read the rest of Agenda 47.
So,
Um,
I mean, I'm gonna stop you right there because they seem to think it doesn't matter. They seem to think that these words don't matter. And what they really seem to think, and by they, I mean the folks who are supporters of Trump, and I want to be really clear. I'm talking about the people who are extreme supporters, like straight up MAGA folks. They seem to here's what they seem to accept: that norms are not important, that sticking to the law is not important, that there are lots of previous presidents who would have loved to, as you put it, rule by fiat, but they knew that that is just not what America is about. You can't do it that way. It's against the norms. It's going to cause problems down the road. It's not what the point of the country is. It it puts us in league with other countries that we previously would laugh at and disparage. And these same people were whining and crying when Biden would make one EO, or executive order, one EO about anything.
Mhm.
You can't just do that. You can't just go around Congress. And they seem to have now accepted that norms are not important. We want to smash all of those norms, even if they seem to forget Trump won't be in power forever.
Correct.
What are you going to do when the Democrats come back in? What are you going to do when the Democrats decide to play the same game? Are they allowed to now rule by fiat? Of course not. They're going to rail against it. But it's going to be the exact same thing that Trump has been doing.
Yeah.
And this breaking down of norms and this acceptance of not listening to courts and essentially just doing whatever you want is really against their own beliefs. But for some reason, they're willing to eschew those beliefs all of a sudden because it's coming from Trump. If it's coming from Trump, we're down with it, whatever it is. And
Yeah, or
I'm
maybe they're uncomfortable, but it's not enough to push them over the line into dropping their support for him, into, writing a congressman about how, people in the bureaucracy ought to follow the Constitution even if, Trump doesn't want them to. They can't actually bring themselves to well, maybe it's like having an unpleasant family member. You don't want the bad family member to do bad things, but what can you do? I think
right.
most of, Trump supporters are in that position themselves, and it's a very human position to be in. Um,
But what
but
do you make of the hypocrisy of it all? What do you make of the fact that they are because, I think a lot of Democrats get themselves in a mental space where they think all we have to do is lay bare the hypocrisy, and they, meaning MAGA folks, will realize, oh, I'm being a hypocrite. You're right. I shouldn't. Why am I being like this? But it seems to me, no, they know very well that they're being hypocritical, and they're perfectly fine with it. And as soon as the Democrats get back into power, that hypocrisy will come back tenfold, even stronger than it is now.
I'm
So
not sure.
why are they accepting this hypocrisy from themselves, their leaders, their media personalities? Why are they okay with the blatant hypocrisy, not even trying to hide it?
I'm not even sure if they realize it's hypocrisy. I don't
Oh,
think
I
that they
think they
go quite
do. I
that
think I
far.
think they
What
realize it and they accept it.
what they well, they'll go this far. Biden and the Democrats do it, so, you can't complain about Trump doing it because what about them?
But
And
that's
that's
not
it.
true.
It's not well, correct. It is not true. It is not true. There are differences, and I keep meaning to catalog all them all in my own head, and I just never get very far. But the thing is, as soon as you complain about Trump doing something, you hear sooner or later, someone says, "Well, what about Biden?" And then I'll turn around and say, "Well, now wait a second. When Biden did it was wrong. He's no longer in power, so the wrong thing could have been corrected. Where does that leave you?" And I get silence. I get crickets.
No, but what you're
And
ignoring the fact that Biden did not do it. Biden didn't
correct.
do anything like what's going on right now. They think that it's a false equivalency. It
It
doesn't
is.
exist.
Yeah, yeah. Well, no, well, I mean, there are some things that he got reversed on, such as, canceling student, loan debt. There are a few other things. But, it was not
Yeah, oh, I'm so
wholesale.
sorry that I tried to help out people who
Yeah,
have
it was
you know.
not it was not the wholesale, um, violation of norms. Whole bodies of law are ignored, especially the Administrative, Procedures Act, which is where we get most of it's the legislative engine, behind, why agencies do what they do, why they choose
Can
to
you
do what
dive
they do.
deeper into that? Explain.
Give you an example, my favorite example. Um, Congress, had to decide where our national capital would be. It was decided that it would be somewhere on the Potomac River because it kind of had to be in the South. Slavery was an issue. It was concentrated in the South. People who were predicting such things were afraid that the South would break away to protect slavery, but at least throw them to the South. You put the capital in the South, and that'll be part of the inertia against separating. So, okay, we've got it on the Potomac. Congress said, there's this particular place on the Potomac that would be very nice to have as part of the capital. Okay, so it's got to be there. It's got to be 10 miles square, 10 miles on a side, like our Constitution says. And then otherwise, it's some convenient placement. Look at this. Telling George Washington, I think he actually surveyed it himself. But don't call me on that. Uh, you got to have this place on the river. Got to be convenient. Got to be 10 miles square. Otherwise, fill in the details yourself. He actually moved it upstream so that he could take advantage of the junction with another river called the Anacostia River. And so now there's actually two rivers in Washington, the Anacostia emptying into the Potomac, still within the district. He moved it up. That wasn't what Congress said. So he went back to Congress and said, okay, this is where we really ought to have it. And Congress said, okay. But look what happened. Congress told the Washington what to do, gave some general standards, enough that he could at least understand what his marching orders were. Government regulations are exactly the same thing. Congress says, okay, executive, got to make the food safe. You got to have inspectors for it. And then you've got the Department of Agriculture that figures out how to make food safe. You don't want rotten fish going into supply. You have ways to inspect frozen fish while it's still on the boat, for example. You got your meat inspectors. And well, all this costs money. It costs money to come up with particular regulations. It costs money to have people who are checking to make sure that the regulations are followed. And that's why we have such high government spending besides the entitlements. Doge comes along and thinks, okay, we don't need all these regulators,
Oh.
which was, of course, was a mistake. I lost
But
where we
but
were heading
regard
on
but
this.
well, but regarding the administrative, you said, I believe you said
Adminis
administrative.
Procedures Act. Yeah, yeah.
And to whom does that pertain? Does that tell the president how he must behave in relation to Congress? I'm not familiar with it.
It does. It says, well, it says it's pretty much the whole executive branch is the president and everyone whom he must supervise to ensure or to take care that the laws be faithfully executed.
Okay.
And so Well, the reason we have regulators is that they're taking care that what Congress says has to be done is going to be done, and they take care, and then the president takes care that they take care. And he's one man. You know, he can't
Mhm.
run every department by himself. Even one department by himself would be a lot. So as part of this whole taking care thing that gets delegated down into the regulators, and then you have
And
some who
how
are,
and you feel that it's just not being followed right now? You feel that it's being bastardized somehow?
it's being violated.
Mhm.
I mean, Congress, as part of that, has established the departments that do certain things, and then it has this law that um, governs how they're supposed to set regulations. And a different there's a there are different well, each department has its own standards for how people would be hired and whatnot. Each authorization and appropriation among the 12 major departments, the 12 major budget bills and authorization bills. You don't just fire someone willy-nilly because they refuse to do what you want. Some of them can only be fired for cause. And a lot of the suits that the executive branch is facing now is because these procedures weren't followed. Whole
Well,
departments, so whole agencies are being closed down because, and that runs afoul of the appropriations. Congress says that money is to be spent on certain things, and the executive branch, especially Trump, has said no, we're not spending money on that, which it's it blatantly violates the congressional will, the legislative intent.
yeah.
Um, it's
Well,
called
we're
impoundment.
going yeah, I was just gonna say impoundment. So,
Yeah.
um, we're gonna take a break in just a moment, a little bathroom break for both of us. When we come back, our second segment is going to focus on the fact that a presidency is more than the president and that it includes a cabinet, and why most people don't take into consideration when they hire a president that you're really hiring essentially an entire company and you're trusting that that company is all going to do the right thing. And we're going to go over a few of the members of the cabinet and the decisions that they're making right now. And for our last shortest segment, we're going to go over some current events and how they're affecting everybody. But um, go over before I let you go for this break. Why is tell us how impoundment affects the daily life of Americans and why we should care. And define it if you can.
Well, impoundment is when Congress says spend money on X, and the president does not spend money on X.
And they have the power of the purse, and if money is appropriated, the president is required to spend said money on whatever Congress said it must be spent on.
That's right. That's one of the laws that the executive branch must take care be faithfully executed. Yeah. Congress says spend money. President says, okay, here we go.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And so how do average Americans get affected when the president just decides, well, I'm not spending that money, and and if I do spend it, I'm not spending it the way Congress told me to.
Uh, the only example I can think of offhand, and it's because I've got an international affairs bent, is the Agency for International Development.
Okay,
Have you
USA.
heard? Yeah. Have you heard of something called soft power?
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, of course,
This
but
is this is
for sorry, hold that thought because you're bringing up an important point, and I want our listeners and our viewers. Soft power is something that we have essentially um, just, I mean, forsaken. We've given it up in this
may I define
administration.
it?
In this, and soft power is essentially, I believe the most poignant quote, and I don't remember which general said it, but he said, "If you don't properly fund the State Department, then you're going to be buying me more bullets." And what he meant by that was, if we don't have our, if we don't have enough ambassadors worldwide watching what's going on, communicating with the leadership of other countries, if we don't have proper aid distribution to the countries that really need it, if we are not being essentially good neighbors and good stewards of this world around the world, then we are losing a lot of power, because that soft power essentially means making other people like you so we don't have to fight with them. So it's the same way. Go ahead.
Not necessarily like you. It's the power to make other people
Need
want
you.
it's the power to make other people want what you want.
Sure.
And diplomacy, yeah, that's a very, big way to put it, but also goodwill. I mean,
Hmm.
how many millions of lives have we saved over the decades because we distributed vaccines and vitamins and food aid?
The better
And
question is
it
how many people have died because of us essentially closing down USAID.
which is why we're leaking soft power.
Hmm.
And when you turn everything into, all right, let's make a deal so I get more than I deserve, and you go along with it. Or even if
Hmm.
it's okay, let's get things that are roughly equivalent. You're still making a deal. What you're not doing is making and keeping your neighbors.
Right.
And you have goodwill with by distributing aid, by building development projects, but with disaster relief. Some teams even by giving a steady supply of vaccines or whatever. And all this does translate into goodwill.
Yep.
And also it has stabilizing effects. If there's wars in the third world, I guarantee you, sooner or later, something about that comes home to roost. And
Yeah.
eventually
And
we end up needing to project our own military power one way or another. And everyone knows somebody in the service, right?
yeah.
So, I mean, we have the indirect thing from becoming a great power because of all the soft power that we have. We all benefit a little bit from that in our daily lives, even if it doesn't seem direct. And then we all have people who may end up marching on foreign soil because we couldn't keep things stable, and we find it's in our interest, our national interest, to restore stability somewhere. And
Yeah. Well,
that's yeah. Go ahead.
go ahead. Well, just before we go to our break, I will give a personal example that I've seen with my own eyes. So I've been to South and Central America many times. And one thing that I've seen in Central America when I was traveling to some of the smaller villages that are in extreme poverty. Now, firstly, they're fine with it. Well, they're surreptitiously fine with it. When you go to these villages, the people are extremely happy. They have a very, very strong family life. They eat wonderful food that they catch themselves. I've had the extreme honor of being able to sit down at absent a dinner table with banana leaves behaving as my actual plate, with some of the best food I've ever had on it that a family prepared for me. And I've been to two or three events like that. When you go to these villages, you notice that a lot of the houses, which frequently are built up on stilts, they're just little shacks. I mean, they're minimum shelter, but they were provided by USAID, or they were provided by UNICEF, or they were provided by some NGO. And a lot of the time, it is money that the American taxpayer has directly paid that has helped a country in Central America in a way that they can't help themselves. And when you see those signs, you realize how much we really do in these smaller developing countries and how important we are. And the example that I would give is when you go to that country later on and you say, look, we feel that there's too many drugs coming out of your country. And we feel that that flow needs to stop. You're harming our country in multiple ways. You go to that country and you say, what we're going to do is we're going to yank the money that we are spending right now to make sure that your populace, even in the most remote villages, has shelter, has food, has rice, has flour, excuse me, has baby formula, has somebody coming through once, twice, three times a year to provide vaccines, eye exams, even to provide education in some cases. We say, we don't have to do that. We can pull that support if we want. So, what we want you to do is devote more of your resources to keeping the drugs from flowing over to our country. We've got leverage there. That's what that's called, is leverage. What Trump seems to have decided is we're yanking all that leverage. We don't want that leverage. Instead of that leverage, our leverage is the United States military. And we're just going to fire off missiles at boats that we presume have drugs on them, boats that literally don't even have enough fuel to get to the United States.
Right. Yeah.
So, and we're just going to bomb them out of the sea. It's kind of like, you know, you can go to your teacher in high school and say, "Hey, can I do a little extra credit work so that I can get an A? I really, I want to do this the right way," versus going to that same teacher and holding a gun to their head and saying, "Give me an A. Give me an A now." And I know that's an
Yeah.
extreme example, but
Yeah.
it really is apt. It's just this soft power is what made us the police of the world for so long. And Trump claims he wants to continue to be the police of the world. He wants the rest of the world doing what he wants. And instead of doing it by gaining leverage, he's doing it with threats of tariffs or military action.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's not the building relationships. It's you do what I want, or I I drop the boom.
Yeah, or
So
or
yeah.
just tariffs,
Yeah,
or I'll
well,
destroy
tariffs.
your
Yeah,
economy.
tariffs are a boom.
All right, and we are back with Ewen Allison, attorney, as he mentioned, allowed to practice law in D.C. and specializes currently in war crimes, correct?
That's my area of interest. Yeah.
Before I go on to what I said we were going to, which is the cabinet, I want to ask you how you feel about the bombings, or I should say the missilings that we're doing on these little tiny boats coming out of Venezuela that may or may not be involved in drug running. But if they are not vessels that are capable of getting to the United States mainland. So they're clearly not headed straight here with drugs, but we're bombing them anyway. Tell me your opinion on that.
Trump changed things when he said that the attacks on the boats were a non-international armed conflict.
Hmm.
Uh, well, the law of international armed conflict, it's not something that you need a declaration for it to kick in. You got military forces going against each other. You have an armed conflict. What he did do when he um, declared it non-international armed conflict, he made it possible for unlawful operations to be war crimes. Before, they were human rights violations. U.S. Military law and domestic law forbids that sort of thing, so there would be criminal charges stateside.
Hmm.
The international criminal law system um, is still rather primitive. Um, Maybe Venezuela, if they could capture a particular American citizen involved, or some other country could, the International Criminal Court could try them for that. Every country in the world can try certain crimes, well, like war crimes, and especially egregious violations of human rights. Um, Not every country does. But Trump made it much easier for a war crimes charge to be sustained before the International Criminal Court and domestic courts abroad. Um, if you don't want to go deep in the weeds, this is just illegal. I mean, international law says you don't go killing other people's people, other countries' people.
But I mean, I kind of relate it to the idea of basically naming whomever you choose, or excuse me, whoever, if that's the correct way to say it. But if you name somebody a terrorist during the last four administrations, I believe, or three administrations under an AUMF, authorization for use of military force, you are essentially allowed to go after them. I mean, if the president says that they are committing terrorism, they are suddenly essentially a lawful combatant to do whatever you choose to. I relate it to that what you were just describing. Am I correct or incorrect?
Declaring someone a terrorist, uh, that actually doesn't mean much. Uh, I mean, there is some quirks in U.S. law where uh, particular charges are enhanced, um, but internationally, you just don't declare someone a terrorist and then instantly they're an outlaw. Uh, I mean, if
But
they
that's how
are,
we've been. I mean, that's how we've been acting for the
yeah.
last several administrations.
Well, I do have to go a bit into the weeds. The
Hmm.
only way that is legal for you to fight in a war is if you're a member of a regular armed force or something like the National Guard that's actually been federalized and sent abroad. You know, if you've got a volunteer militia and it becomes added to um, the regular active duty part, then okay, then you're a combatant. You're not one of those, then it's unlawful for you to engage in combat operations, which is how most terrorists are. Um, that's the rubric they fall under. They're citizens, but because they fight, they lose civilian immunity,
Are
and
you
that includes.
suggesting? No, sorry. Go ahead.
So, uh, yeah, I mean, if let's say if Hamas had a commando raid on the Israeli embassy in Washington D.C., um, they would not be lawful combatants, and they could be put on war crimes trials for their attack. If they were, let's say, regular Jordanian army, and there was an armed conflict between Jordan and Israel, then they could only be held until the hostilities were over with.
Hmm.
Um, thing is, if you don't just make someone a terrorist and then go out and shoot them, you can't do that with, well, like the fisherman that we've heard about who was on one of those boats that was attacked. You don't just pronounce that he's a terrorist and then all of a sudden he's a fair game. You don't
No, I'm not.
pronounce that, yeah,
No, I'm not suggesting that it's illegal. I'm
right.
suggesting that that's the way we've been behaving. Legality set aside.
That's the problem of setting aside legality.
Well, yeah, clearly. But
Yeah.
okay, so let me ask you. I do want to get to the cabinet, but let me ask you a real straightforward question. And if you are either unable because of your profession and the rules of it, or if you're just unwilling to answer it, that's perfectly fine. The way things are going right now, we've got 3 years and 2.5 months left to go in this current administration. Assuming things continue going the way that they're going and continue to escalate the way that you can pretty easily predict from following the news, is our president going to one day be in the same situation as Netanyahu and be a legitimate ruler in his own land, but be brought up on war crimes?
I think it's quite possible that the attacks on the Venezuelan boats, because they're Venezuelan craft, and because Venezuela is a party to the International Criminal Court, then the people who perpetrated those attacks uh, can be brought up on charges if uh, Trump explicitly authorized them. He could. There's something called command responsibility, where, well, ultimately he's commander in chief, so he's responsible for everything that the armed forces do.
So the individual
So
commanders who order the strikes, who actually order the missiles fired, they are not to blame. The president would be.
they they would be. And if the president does not bring them before military courts or whatever the circumstances would be that would put them in civilian courts, if he doesn't do that, he has command responsibility over that, and he can face charges himself before the International Criminal Court. And understand this: there's something called universal jurisdiction. there are some crimes that are so severe, any country in the world can try them. Switzerland can put people on trial for piracy. Switzerland is landlocked. But it's one of these crimes of universal jurisdiction. Domestic legislation sometimes forbids this. It happened in Belgium with Simon Peres. He was facing an indictment in Belgium for the Jabria massacre in Lebanon. And then the Belgian legislature took that power away from their courts. And so there went that particular indictment. But there could be other countries that still do want to exercise universal jurisdiction. And where there are war crimes, that's one of the things, especially the more severe war crimes. That's something that Trump might be criminally liable for if he doesn't get his act together about prosecuting people who committed these crimes.
But clarify our current standing with the ICC, with the International Criminal Court. What is our standing with them right now?
We are not party to the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, which means that if there are crimes within the court's jurisdiction committed on American soil, the International Criminal Court will not have jurisdiction. Now, Americans who commit crimes on the soil of other countries, and keep in mind that for purposes of the statute, a vessel of a country is enough to create territorial jurisdiction. So, but if you're an American and you commit one of the crimes that are within the court's jurisdiction, then there is another wrinkle involved. But long story short, that it's possible that you'd be criminally liable.
But I mean, since we're not, I mean, participating, that means that Trump can get away with whatever he wants as far as ICC jurisdiction goes, correct?
He could face indictment depending on how these attacks on Venezuelan craft go. And if it had just been limited to an extrajudicial killing, well, we have judicial killings, they're called executions. Some killings are okay in police actions where the police are nearly outgunned and have to neutralize a target, like what happened when Trump's assassin was taken out.
Mm.
We have those are judicial. Those are executions that are permitted under law everywhere. But here, where people are not fighting back, but you kill them anyway, that's outside what the law permits. It's called an extrajudicial killing. These are human rights violations at least, and sometimes under international law, that's all they are. If there's not an armed conflict, it's an extrajudicial killing. It's a human rights violation, and there's not necessarily criminal liability for it.
But because we are choosing not to participate right now, Trump is not subject to anything. I mean, any indictments or anything from the ICC, aren't I correct? And not only that, and correct me if I am wrong about that. Keep that in the back of your head for 2 seconds. One question that I had was Interpol. I mean, we have Interpol offices in the United States and at some of our entry points in our ports and our airports, etc. We just hosted Putin in Alaska, and he's been indicted, if I'm not incorrect, for various crimes through the ICC. Why did why did Interpol not arrest him the second that he hit American soil? So first question is Trump truly liable for anything that he does as far as the ICC goes? Second question is, why wasn't Putin arrested the second he touched land in Alaska?
He is. I don't know the status of that Interpol officers here have, if they actually have arrest powers. The way I understand Interpol works is that it's more of a coordinating agency. They don't actually have officers who go out and arrest people.
Okay.
What they
So it's
do
up to the
do is
individual
say,
country to do the arrests.
France, for example, France, yes, yeah, France says, we want this guy. Can you extradite him? And so Interpol would be the channel through which that request would be relayed.
Okay.
Um, And because we're not a party to the Rome Statute, we did not have an obligation to turn we did not have an obligation to turn Putin over to the ICC. We do not have an obligation to turn Netanyahu over to the ICC. We could if we want. We can cooperate as much as we like with the ICC, with the International Criminal Court.
Well,
You
you
know,
you
but
you got to understand that when a layperson is looking at this, they go, "Look, we're trying to get leverage over both of these countries. Both of these men have been in our country. Why not turn them over to the ICC?" And I would call that pretty damn good leverage.
it would be very good leverage. Yeah. The thing is, how do you want to take too heavy a hand? I mean, there are times we do need Russia's goodwill to accomplish a lot of things that we want to accomplish. Um, and the same thing with Israel. Uh, and frankly, if you play your cards right, you would never be faced with the situation where you have an indicted war criminal on your soil. And I don't think I'm not sure, but I don't think it happened when during Biden's presidency. Because this is one of those things where you have people whose eye it is to avoid embarrassment, and
Hmm.
they would avoid having um, uh, indicted criminal suspects coming in, so we would at least avoid that much embarrassment.
So let us
Can I
let's
can I
put it
back up for
put
a sec?
sure.
And I don't want this to be lost on people, and this is the most important thing Americans should know about the ICC. The part of that law that set up that court says if countries do not try their own criminals themselves, only then does the ICC have jurisdiction. And we have to keep our own house in order. We have to develop a muscle memory. We have to keep the power of our own courts, the social power, the social impetus beyond courts doing what they do and every other branch complying with what the court says. We got to keep this muscle memory ourselves, from the lay citizen juror on up to the whole institution built around arresting people and investigating people, hopefully not in that order, and then putting them on trial and then punishing them ourselves. This is we have to keep our own criminals out of the clutches of the ICC, and we have to keep our own constitutional order strong, our own rule of law strong. And that doesn't happen if we just foist the problem off onto somebody else.
Right.
Thank you for indulging me, but I don't want listeners to think I think that the ICC ought to arrest Trump. I think as this thing with the attacks on the Venezuelan boats, especially, and everything else that uh, after evidence is sussed out and it proves to be genuine, whatever else he might be liable for, um, I think we have to take care of Trump ourselves then.
Yeah. Well,
Evidence permitting, law permitting, rationality permitting.
yeah, good luck seeing that happen. But I mean, it can be easily argued that almost any of our presidents, not well, okay, that's a bit of an exaggeration. Uh, it could be easily argued that 15 to 20, give or take, of our presidents have committed what would be considered war crimes, and depending on what angle you're coming from and what your opinion is of whatever the international conflict is. So I'm certainly not suggesting the same thing either. But since I see a lack of any accountability coming from our own country anymore, I just wonder, the same way that I wondered why George W. Bush wasn't brought up on war crimes, or for that matter, even Colin Powell for going and saying things to the UN that he knew to be most likely false. He didn't know them to be patently false, but he knew them to be most likely false. Why some of these other people weren't brought up on war crimes, and
Well,
yet
the war crime of aggression had not been really well defined until actually I think maybe 20 years into the existence of the ICC. So
when
I
did
mean,
the
yeah, there
ICC
are.
start?
Uh, I think the statute was formally ratified in 1998,
Oh, wow,
and
that's recent.
yeah, and it wasn't until a few years after that it actually started putting people on trial And it wasn't until after that that the war crime of aggression or crimes against peace, was it aggression? Oh boy, I belie my own ignorance here. It's been so long since I've had to work in that part of the law. But you know, there's a body of law about how you fight a war, and a separate body of law about when to go to war. And
Mhm,
you can um, go to war and lawfully, perfectly lawfully, and have all kinds of war crimes that happened with Israel beating down Hamas.
mhm.
Okay, I mean that was an international armed conflict. If you think Hamas was a de facto state, so you know the whole Geneva Conventions, every part of them applied. But and so that was, you know, in terms of the law of when to go to war, that was a lawful war. And but you can also have um, an unlawful war and observe war crimes laws scrupulously, so that you don't commit war crimes. You're careful not to um, cause more harm to civilians and civilian property than you get the military advantage from, for example. You don't
Yeah, that hasn't
torture.
been violated in Gaza or anything like that.
Oh
So,
no, not at all. We're being
right.
ironic.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. Uh, so, but, you know, a big reason that Bush didn't get indicted for waging an aggressive war is because the law was so incomplete on that. We knew what happened with Japan, we knew what happened with Germany, but there hadn't been a formal definition of it issued that actually became solid law
Okay.
until rather recently, and even then just before the ICC.
I gotcha. We got about 10 minutes left in this segment. I want to shift gears kind of severely, so I apologize
That's all right.
preemptively to our listeners and our viewers and to yourself, Ewan. But I've got the list of the cabinet members in front of me, and this is going to be an entire podcast series. People are going to have plenty of time to find out my opinions, and they're also going to get to see me talk to Democrats, independents. They're going to see me talk to MAGA folks. They're going to see me talk to all kinds of folks. But right now, who I have in front of me is Ewen Allison, who is a registered Republican and an anti-Trump person. So, considering that pedigree, I want to just name some names and I want you to tell me as succinctly as you can. Try and keep it to 60 to 120 seconds. Just boil it down to the bare basics. How do you feel about the way this person's been doing their job? And if you go over, it's okay. The first person I'm going to bring up is our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio.
The agencies for international development should not have been dismantled. Um,
Do you feel he's a lapdog, or do you feel that he's really doing what he believes is right?
my sense is he knows what side of the bread is buttered.
Mhm,
I mean, he's there at at Trump's pleasure.
mhm,
Traditionally, someone who was Secretary of State was presidential material, so he's not going to rock the boat too much because then he knows that he's going to alienate MAGA world
mhm.
and maybe even what Republicans were kindly disposed to him before he went over. Um, who's next?
Well, firstly, last, just to close that up, is he doing a good job? It's a
No,
yes or no question. All
no,
right.
no.
Next person is Pete Hegseth, our Secretary of Defense slash Secretary of War, which, by the way, is not an official title. It's a title that he has been allowed to use. He's still the Secretary of Defense, but he's allowed to also, on official documents, call himself the Secretary of War, and he's allowed to call the Department of War, but it remains officially the Secretary and the Department of Defense. So, how about Pete Hegseth?
My impression from him is that he's more a glory seeker.
Mhm,
He's reveling in what power he has, which is a lot. Let's be
mhm.
fair.
He's in charge of
Um,
the United States
I,
military.
yeah, I don't know what exact military decisions he's making, whether they follow sound doctrine or not. We've kicked the Venezuelan boat issue to death. He should never have authorized those. Um, an issue that is on some people's radar screen right now is training of Qatari military pilots in the upper Northwest.
Yeah, but let's make
And
clear that that is
yeah,
not out of the norm. I mean, I know that a lot of people are calling that an issue. To me, that's not an issue. Allowing the
yeah,
It is an issue in it so far as it's very clear that from the plane that was given to President Trump's library to all kinds of other favors that have been done, the Qataris are getting lots of favors from us and will continue to. However, having a quote unquote military base, which is really no more than a training facility, I believe, for F-16s or F-15s,
it's part of
is
an
is
existing base. Yeah, and
and
there
it's
are
also
parallel.
commonplace for other
Yeah,
countries.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. So that's not so bad. You can't really hold that against him. On the other hand, well, the Quantico, the speech of Quantico is raised eyebrows all over. This whole business about a new warrior ethos, essentially turning it into a white man's army, which is foolish because there are people who are capable of doing other missions that you don't necessarily need the strongest person and someone who's, well, whatever he is afraid will be the reaction of a white man when a black man is beside him in the trench.
Or a
Uh,
woman for that
doing
matter.
that, yeah, or woman, yeah, and people who've actually experienced that, and they see that their brothers in arms, sisters in arms are as capable as they are. It's not the issue, and yet this is always projected on it as a bad thing and as detrimental. Uh, and he's riding that. I think getting more mileage out of it than it's what it's worth. I think the problems that the military faces aren't uh, this thing that's been projected on them about DEI. Um, I know there's been a lot of pushback internally against it. I wouldn't doubt that there's things are being pushed too far, faster than the changes could be absorbed, faster than would be reasonable. Um, but I don't think that he's worthy of the same respect as other people we've had as secretaries of defense. Typically, it's if it's a civilian in it, it's someone who's been in Congress who has dealt with armed services a lot, or
Yeah.
this, yeah,
Yeah, I want to make really clear to our listeners, number one, this issue will be covered at length in this series. And number two, those folks, if you are one of those folks who says that everything should be based upon merit, be assured that the women and the people of color, and even the people who he seems to have some kind of problem with, who might have to wear a turban or have a certain haircut because of their religion, have proven themselves to be every bit as capable as is required of the job that is given to them. We don't allow idiots or people who are incapable of doing their job to go out and do our war fighting for us. That's not what the United States is about, and that's why we are the most powerful country in the world. So people really need to drop that stupid BS. The next person I'm going to throw at you is in your own realm. Let's talk about Pam Bondi for a minute and a half.
mistake. uh, but the whole direction that she's taking, frankly, I don't think she should have um, gotten even to the point of a first circle of guesses for who would be a good nominee.
Shouldn't have been
And
confirmed.
there's no, no. I mean, it should have stopped as soon as that business about the campaign contribution came out. Um, Now that she's there, she's got the wrong idea about what oversight is. Uh, I mean, the Congress does have a role in making sure that well that the executive branch is working properly. I mean, they are a check on it. They set the rule, they set the standards, and the standards have to be met. Uh, and Pam Bondi approached that whole business of, well, yes, this is how we're doing. We know that there's these things that are these shortcomings. Here's what we're doing to address them. You're being transparent about it so that you yourself are accountable. That's the biggest driver to making sure that a job is done right, as if the people in charge are accountable some way. She had turned that around and turned it into an exercise into shaming members of Congress and pushing back against members of Congress, criticizing them, a whole lot of whataboutism.
Hmm.
And it was just a complete misdirection. It wasn't her standing up for ensuring that justice is being done. It was pushing back against, well, whatever it was she was pushing back against.
So let's be clear about one thing. Whataboutism is an actual specific term, and it refers to a Soviet propaganda tool that essentially is used to distract people from what's actually going on and get them to think about the opposite side. So whenever you are saying, yeah, he did this, but Biden did X, or Obama did X, etc., etc., you are using a, by definition, Soviet propaganda tool that was essentially designed to distract you, the person who is saying, "But what about?" etc., etc. But before we let go of Pam Bondi, how do you feel about the tweet? And if you can't be devastatingly honest here, I understand it. We can move on. But the tweet that was clearly meant to be a private message to Pam Bondi from President Trump basically said, I've reviewed 20 to 30 social media posts. They have been saying negative things about me, such as that we're not going after the folks that we're supposed to go after. And therefore, you need to go after, who am I not thinking of right now since I'm drawing a blank? Come on.
Call me.
Um, I, I've got all their faces in my head. So
Okay.
the senator from California, what's his name?
Um, oh gosh, I'm drawing a blank too.
Oh my
Um,
gosh, we really suck right
this is
now.
not good. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I can
That's
pull
why we
up the
ended that,
tweet.
right?
Well, it
Yeah.
basically
Um,
said we need to go after so and so, so and so, and so and so.
yeah, yeah.
But
You,
how do
you,
you
you,
feel?
you, you mentioned earlier about how norms are being broken. I mean, norms are the we have our Constitution. We have ideas about how to enact particular provisions in it, but also we have this this thought that we don't use uh, the governmental apparatus to go after political enemies.
There we go. That's what I'm asking you
And
just to talk about.
yeah, and here we have Trump exactly saying, Pam, do exactly that.
Hmm.
And he's convinced himself that, I think the exact quote is, they're guilty as hell. He doesn't
Hmm.
know that. I mean, these things, they've been investigated, and there's a little fuzziness around the edges, but not guilt as hell. And even the fuzziness is second tier stuff like improper testimony, incorrect testimony. It's not outright, I don't know, lying to a judge. Although that actually did happen in some of the Russian intervention issues. There was one or two FBI agents who were actually convicted of giving false testimony for a FISA warrant, foreign. Um, um,
It was Adam Schiff,
yeah.
by the way. Adam Schiff, James
Oh,
Comey,
Adam
and
Schiff.
Letitia
Yeah.
Letitia James.
Uh,
And let's
yeah.
call it what it is. This is retaliatory action from a president of the United States using his Justice Department to go against his rivals. That is patently against that's anti-American is what it is.
It
Is
is.
what
Yeah.
separates us from all the other countries.
Yeah. It's using the American government to pursue a private um,
Vendetta.
vendetta. Yeah. Something private, including a vendetta. Yeah. I mean, he said in his uh, first campaign speech, uh, "I am your retribution. I am your retribution." And for sure, we can bet he went in there expecting that he would use the governmental apparatus as his own revenge machine, which is not what it's for.
No, but I'm
I
going to
mean, you
ask you to
don't.
go into the. I'm sorry to interrupt you again, but I'm going to ask you to go because we're running out of time in this segment. I'm going to ask you to go into the future and tell me what are the ramifications of it becoming a norm that a president can go after his political rivals with the Department of Justice. What are what are the ramifications for our children, and what are the ramifications for the Republicans when the Democrats come back into power? Is this okay in any way?
if the Democrats have less integrity than the Republicans, yeah, then it's just going to be a different bunch, a different body of revenge taking. And the Democrats can turn right around and say, well, okay, you don't like us getting revenge because this guy was maliciously prosecuted. What about going after Comey?
Hmm.
And yeah, it is whataboutism, but I mean, if uh, if you think whataboutism is a moral standard, then you can't deny it when it comes around to bite you in the face.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, just to put my own,
Because then the norm is gone, and Republicans can no longer invoke it because it's been blown out of the water. It's no longer a norm. It's just whoever happens to more power to hold power. So we have rule by power. You have the law of rulers instead of the rule of law.
hmm yeah, and it's similar to, changing the rules of the Senate to get rid of the filibuster or to, I mean, any of the tactics that we've seen being used, such as, McConnell not allowing Merrick Garland to come up
Uh,
for a vote, and then doing the exact same thing when Trump came along, which, by the way, was called the Biden rule. Um,
mm,
and I'm sorry, our listeners have no idea what I'm talking about. So in the last few months of the Obama presidency, he nominated Merrick Garland for the Supreme Court. Mitch McConnell basically refused him the ability to become a Supreme Court judge. He subsequently wound up being Attorney General during the Biden administration, but he said we will never bring up that kind of a vote in the last months of a presidency, and that is
McConnell
the
said that,
Biden
yeah.
rule. Yeah, and we're going to stick to it. And then when the exact same thing happened under Trump, he literally said, I think during a campaign fundraiser, they said, "What will you do if the same thing happens under Trump?" And he took a sip of his water and he said, "I'd bring them up for a vote," and gave a smug little smile. That kind of norm busting, to me, and that kind of hypocrisy and just that kind of blatant, whatever you want to call it. I mean, it's just it's very hard for someone like me who considers himself a rational person to internalize how somebody who considers themselves to be to have integrity, how could you act in this way? And that's my last
I
thought
think
before we go to break.
oh,
I'm listening to
Paul,
you though.
yeah. Uh, the thing about hypocrisy is, put it to one side. You're always going to have somebody doing the wrong thing, and you go after them because they've done the wrong thing. And you're going to have situations where someone doing the wrong thing is more dangerous because they hold the reins of power. Whatever Biden did that you didn't like, um, it's not going to have the same effect as if Trump turns around and does it himself. And you know, you can throw the word corruption out there. If Biden was corrupt, if corruption was supposed to end, why would you be okay with Trump being corrupt? And you know, you shouldn't be okay. This is why we have to go after specific acts rather than the people. We have to pay close attention to the facts in each set of circumstances, even I mean, regardless of the actors involved. If you can focus on the wrongdoing as such, I think that's going to end a lot in the divisionness, and it's going to make people more accountable, and there's going to be less reason for people to be divided.
Hmm. In future episodes of this cast, we are going to go over, believe it or not, exactly how to fix the exact problem you just brought up. But we are going to break. I once again want to thank you and for being here. We got one last short segment that we're just going to go over some current events, and we'll be right back. All right, everybody, welcome back to the last segment of this edition of Reason Rises. I had said that we were going to do this segment on current events, and by current events, I'm kind of defining it as anything that's come up in the last 9 months or so during this particular Trump administration. And I'm going to give my answer to the question first. But here's the question that I posed to Mr. Allison is, what do you think is the number one issue that anyone any American who believes in the Constitution should be paying attention to right now. And my answer was actually brought up by Ewan earlier in the cast, which is the 14th Amendment. I just want to read word for word what the end of Section 1 of that amendment says, which I think is really important. Aside from the beginning, which says all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States, of the state wherein they reside. But to me, here's the important part. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny any person, again, any person within its jurisdiction, the equal protection of the laws. And I think right now we are seeing that being abused and ignored in ways that I find horrifying, and we will be covering that in other editions of Reason Rises. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Allison. He's free to respond to that or just bring up what he thinks is most important right now. But I think what we should all be paying attention to is the fact that that amendment is just not being followed right now.
But the part that refers to no state shall infringe on these rights. Look at the Fifth Amendment. Let's see. No uh, person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. That
Mm-hmm.
is what applies to the federal government. And that is what we really need to be worried about. Well, that's probably the second thing, because the even bigger thing is whether the Trump recrudescence is going to obey court orders.
Mm-hmm.
If a court finds that the executive branch is doing something that's unlawful, certainly if it's unconstitutional, and says stop doing that, anyone from Trump on down must stop doing it, because if you have Trump deciding he's not going to follow that, then we don't have rule of law anymore. We have rule of Trump.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, people who have paid closer attention to this than I have say that he's actually obeyed court orders mostly. There's some fuzziness about particular court orders relating to immigration. Uh, we don't know how long this is going to last. It's like any pattern in an unstable situation. The pattern holds until it doesn't. We don't know how long Trump and people under Trump, Pam Bondi especially, maybe even when it comes to military issues, Hegseth, we don't know to what extent they're actually going to feel like they have to comply with courts and therefore comply with the rule of law. Courts are the most active bulwark that we have, who can actively do something against Trump, against an action by the Trump administration, excuse me. And if the courts, if they are just no longer paid attention to, that's it. We're in a dictatorship.
But you just said against Trump, and there are people out there who would say, "Look, I don't care. I mean, I just genuinely don't care if these norms, laws, amendments are being broken because I trust my boy Trump to do the right thing." What's the danger in that for the average citizen? What is the danger in that thinking for those folks who consider themselves MAGA and who say, if Trump wants to do it, I trust him. It's fine. I'm good with it, even if it is against norms, laws, amendments, etc. What is the danger going forward for those people?
If you have a stake in America remaining the great country that it is, in the constitutional republic that it is, if you have a personal stake in that, then you cannot want Trump
Hmm.
to be dictatorial. Uh, in dictatorships, a lot of times people will abuse the powers that the dictator has. You've got some low-level functionary who can make somebody else's life miserable, and there's no recourse because there's no courts, and there's no courts because the people above that functionary will stand up for him, and it'll go on right on up the line where ultimately there won't be any sort of justice, there won't be any sort of restraint against someone, uh, some pro-Trump functionary abusing power. It could happen to you, it
And
could
then what
happen to somebody.
happens when the Democrats come into power?
There is that it's the same sort of thing. I don't think that should, I mean, if Democrats should come into power, I don't think it would happen without a lot of instability, maybe a lot of actual physical fighting and combat, because that's usually what happens when there's a dictatorship that becomes unstable, and then you eventually end up getting a different system to replace it. Even if you think it's just a matter of plugging Democrats in where there were Republicans, then yeah, now that there's no norm against retribution, you can expect the Democrats are going to be human and will turn vengeful.
Right.
And
Yeah,
and
I think that any government that is operating on not just being vengeful, but uh, being outright vindictive in a way where where they have essentially no oversight on what they do to their fellow citizens, their fellow government employees. We can go on and on. I mean, Trump laying off all of these people during you know the recent government shutdown,
uh,
and he said it outright that it's essentially to punish Democrats for a shutdown that you can attribute to Democrats, or you can attribute to the fact that the Republicans, for God knows what reason, just won't allow the healthcare subsidies to continue. Um, these things are going to come back tenfold upon yourself, would be my view, because if you erase those norms and you erase the idea that you can't use these offices and these privileges a um, as a public servant to be to as retribution, you are going to be subject to that same retribution. And like I think you just referred to, that could lead to physical violence and what everybody's so afraid of right now, which is essentially a second civil war. I don't want to even have that discussion. I don't believe enough of my fellow Americans are unreasonable enough to participate in a civil war. I believe that even if something that could be called a civil war were to start, it would end pretty quickly because all the people that believe the two sides of America are going to fully participate in this war are going to find themselves drastically disappointed that their fellow Americans are not into this. This is
right,
not cool.
yeah.
So yeah, I think those folks should be afraid of that same retribution being visited upon themselves. Do you agree with that?
I definitely see it as a possibility. I mean, the only reason that revenge wouldn't be visited upon the MAGA camp would be if the Democrats or whoever succeeds the Republicans, if they have enough integrity to say it stops here, and we're not going to do what they do. Um, that it has happened. I mean, there have been times when there have been massive and systematic persecutions that have gone on, and the people who are persecuted do not turn around and do the same thing. They just put everybody on trial who deserves to be put on trial. We don't know whether that can happen. That's why I don't think we should be having any kind of talk about a revolution, is because we just don't know how they're going to turn out.
Here's
And
my final thought. Oh no, go ahead, finish.
I would much rather, even if our Constitution is frayed, let's go through all the motions like it's still in full force. Let's put people on trial who deserve to be put on trial. Let's use our First Amendment remedies petition government for redress of grievances, speak, publish, gather, apply all this pressure against the government and against your neighbors who are actually supporting the government, and maybe realize that it doesn't have to be that way, and make it
It
easy for
doesn't.
yeah, make it easier for your neighbors to join you too. I mean, everyone's going to have their limits for when Trump has gone too far, and they're going to need to be welcomed into the anti-Trump camp, with open arms.
So here's my final thought on that subject is I speak with a lot of high-level Democrats. Um, I'm not gonna act like I speak to them frequently every day or anything, but a few times a year I get an audience with someone who is a decision maker. And here is the honest truth about what the Democratic Party is thinking right now. There are two different ways that Trump, in our opinion, is abusing his power that are pertinent to this particular part of the conversation. One is using the Justice Department against people in a retaliatory way. Number two is the way that he is so deftly and effectively used media and social media to affect change in a way that we find really deplorable. And what I'm hearing in Democratic circles is that number one, violence never acceptable. Period.
Thank you.
We were not for Charlie Kirk being killed. We were not for Trump going through two assassination attempts. We are not for a civil war. We
Correct.
Violence is off the table.
All correct.
But but using the Justice Department against our fellow citizens, regardless of whether they're governmental or not, also off the table unless warranted and based on fact. However, using the media and social media in a way that is um, not the way it was intended, we're starting to get on board with that. And we are starting to think, you know what? It's time to fight fire with fire. So, to be ultra clear, violence off the table. But using media and social media to, I mean, just in a bastardized way, not to use that term twice in one podcast, but just in a way that is changing people's minds by using psychology and sales tactics and marketing tactics to turn the country against you. We're starting to come on board with doing whatever we need to do because the ends will justify the means. And before anybody has a problem with what I just said, you have to acknowledge that that is Trump's game. That's what he's excellent at. That's what he's a pro at. That's what has defined his presidency is using psychological, sales, and marketing tricks to essentially turn Americans against one another, against their own best interests, and against the constitutionally mandated behaviors and norms that we should expect as Americans. And if they're going to keep just tearing down brick by brick this government that is made to keep us all together, e pluribus unum, from many one, if they are going to continue doing that, we're starting to get to a place where we're ready to do the same. And I'll let you have the last word here, Mr. Allison.
Marketing, persuasion, discussing things, putting things out there, making things simple and instantly understandable, satire. None of those words that I said are anti-Trump. None of those words that I said are pro-rule of law. None of those things I said are love our Constitution because you love our country. But you know what? All those things that you listed, you can do. You can use for being anti-Trump, for being pro-Constitution, for being pro-rule of law, for being, hey, we're neighbors. When all this is over with, we're still going to be neighbors. Oh, by the way, let me shovel your driveway. I'm in Northern Maine. Neighbors shovel each other's driveways all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
You do favors because you're neighbors and you want to be nice, even if you're on the wrong side about whether to cut the elm trees down in the cemetery. That was a nasty fight about 20 years ago. But you get my point, right?
Yeah, I
You
do.
know, we can do all these things with doing the things that we should be proud of, like our Constitution, like our love of the rule of law and freedom and liberty, where we see politics as a way to resolve differences and not to destroy the enemy. We don't have politics to destroy the enemy.
Yeah. Oh, that's excellently said. We have a hard out that we've already passed. I want to really, really thank not only our listeners for being here. Please remember to like and subscribe. There's lots more coming from this podcast. I want to really thank Mr. Ewen Allison Esquire for being here
My
and
pleasure.
for devoting his time and his expertise, his brain power late at night in Maine. We really appreciate you participating in this late hour.
I
And
know
I
it.
just want to leave everybody with one thought, which is heavily related to what Mr. Allison just said. The people who give you your coffee every day, the people who deliver your mail, the people, or excuse me, deliver your mail, the people who produce the entertainment that you love, the people who talk to you in a restaurant or a bar or bring you your food. When you say Democrats are ripping down our country or destroying our country, or when you say MAGA folks are doing the same, using that kind of language, having that kind of thought, you're talking about your fellow Americans. You're talking, excuse me, you're talking about the people who are integral parts of your daily life and who have no intention of harming you and who don't believe the horrible things that the media would have you think they believe and who are not all in on the agenda you believe the other side may be in on. We all need to keep that top of mind. We cannot allow violence or a civil war or the breakdown of the rule of law to define what our country is. It's not what makes us great. It most certainly is not going to make us great again. So I would leave us with that. Thank you again so much for your time, Mr.
My
Allison.
pleasure. You're welcome.
And we will talk again very soon. And everybody, remember to like and subscribe. And we will be seeing you again soon with somebody else who's not quite as interesting as Mr. Allison, but we hope to attain something like that. Thank you, everybody, for your time.